Democratic State Representative Mary Gonzalez of El Paso and member of the Legislative Budget Board. Thank you so much for joining us. So I just wanted to get your reaction to Governor Abbott's announcement yesterday that the state is making a $250 million down payment on a state-built border wall.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a lot of important issues happening in our state. First reaction is, where are priorities? We have a very serious electrical grid issue happening right now that requires additional investment, but yet we're hearing more about what's the desire to invest in a border wall than we are in taking care of very serious issues impacting Texans right now. My second reaction is, we need to ensure the governor isn't abusing his executive authority and not going through the process of appropriations oversight. There's a reason we have an executive branch and a legislative branch. And the Constitution says the legislative branch are the appropriators. This is not the way it should happen. And so I'm hoping the governor will go back and do it in a way that the process is outlined through our Constitution.
Which would be what?
I mean, if he really wants the funding, which was not appropriated in the regular session, then he has the power to call a special session where we can have this conversation about the funding. But the other part of it is I think we should have a conversation about where are we spending our resources, right? We have very serious issues. We haven't spent money in higher education institutions, facilities. We haven't spent money on our electrical grid. We have huge payments when it comes to unemployment. There's still a large gap in healthcare. The reason we need to have this in a more public light and a conversation and where everybody can participate is because there are other issues that Texans deserve to be heard on.
At yesterday's news conference, some of the legislators there, the Republican legislators there, said that they can make a request of the Legislative Budget Board. So is that's your understanding as well, right? So I know you're a member of that. Is that a fair way, and is that something that's been used in the past?
Of course, you can make a request of the Legislative Budget Board to move appropriations between the bienniums and the interim. That is not always done, and it's usually for special circumstances, but yes, could it be done? Was it done? No.
So that hasn't been done before?
No, it has not been done in this case.
With regards to border security?
Oh, not since I have served in the Legislative Budget Board. I can't say ever, but not since I have served.
And so, but if the governor does this under the disaster funding mechanism, which it seems like he's going to, having now declared a disaster, you say that's still not good enough?
I worry that it sets a bad precedent because the governor has no oversight when he declares something a disaster. And it's very fascinating that he's declared the border a disaster, but not declaring our current electrical situation a disaster. And so, again, is this politics or policy that are influencing what we're calling a disaster and how we are using the powers when we make that declaration? And so, again, there's lots of ways to include the public, to have appropriate legislative oversight, and to really have the priorities of Texans being addressed.
Let me ask you, because the border is certainly an issue that a lot of Texans are concerned about. It has been a top issue, in fact, according to past opinion polls in the state. And so I'm wondering what your thought is about that, because there are a lot of people who think this is a big concern.
I'm not saying it isn't a concern. Of course, I think it's important for us to have a public policy that addresses immigration. We know that it is a part of the reality that we live in Texas and the border. But my question is are we trying to work on policy in a bipartisan way, B, in an actual process that includes a legislature and not just declaring disasters, and C, really trying to find a way to solve the problem and not use the issue for a political agenda.
And let me just ask you, because today the Texas Department of Criminal Justice says that it did start yesterday moving inmates out of one of its facilities in Dilley, Texas, to others to make room for those who are arrested at the border. What is your thought about that?
You know, I feel that the TDCJ has done a lot to ensure and to make sure that we are taking care of our inmates. But I'm really concerned about what the state getting involved in the federal issue. The precedent again is problematic.
And let me just ask you one other thing. Yesterday, the governor did say that as part of this $250 million transfer from the TDCJ's funding to the disaster fund for the $250 million down payment, that it's going to be up to leaders to identify money to put back into TDCJ. Your thoughts on that?
I think this is why we have a legislative process. So the governor can't just move things and then say, okay, legislators, go figure out after I did this where the money should come from. We spent months deliberating over the budget, making sure that we were making smart and responsible decisions. When the governor uses his power in a way that he shouldn't be using it, we will inevitably have future problems. Again, we made very difficult decisions. For example, in years, we have not funded higher ed institution facilities. We need to be doing that. If we knew we were just going to have to move money around, it just creates a different conversation.
Democratic State Representative Mary Gonzalez of El Paso and a member of the Legislative Budget Board. Thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate it.